All right, welcome back to the Fantasy Flex podcast. This is Bryan. Jay, MLB, it's early. We're talking the late slate or not late, the main 7 p.m. slate on Wednesday. You're up and alive.
Yeah, man. Sleep deprivation is real. It is a real thing. I'm not a morning person and never have been, but here I am consistently waking up at 4 in the morning to hit the research and prep for the day. But you're talking to a dude who went his entire senior year of high school without showing up before noon once.
Wow. Ooh, that's impressive.
Yeah, man. If I get some time ever, I'll have to dig up one of my old report cards to show you the unexcused absences for those morning classes. It's impressive.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, so it's early. But we've been up and we're researching it, and we're going to go over the 7 p.m. slate. We have a breakdown coming that's going to hit on the all-day stuff. John's going to write that, and it's going to be out pretty soon. I guess it'll already be out by the time this video is out. So it is already out, but we're going to use this video. We're going to talk about the 7 p.m. slate specifically. Cool. So I guess we can dive straight into Vegas lines. So I think one thing that was a thing that we talked about last pod and something that we've written about is that Vegas lines aren't particularly not that they're not useful or not that they're not correct, because in general they're going to hit it more often than we do. But you can kind of discount them a little bit just because the data shows that Vegas isn't necessarily as spot on, and really just because they don't have as much data. I think we saw this early. I mean, obviously the Giants in the first day scored a ton of runs, but we also had the Dodgers tee off against Tyson Ross, and then we had joked about stacking the Rockies, and apparently that was the correct thing to do. So I think we're going to see examples where you can be different from Vegas and really reap the benefits in tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. We have seen it both days, really. The MLB's been going on. We talked last pod about being cognizant of early season Vegas lines and just how Vegas is wrong in the early season compared to later on. So, we can definitely use this to our advantage. Looking at tonight, you kind of have the similar chalk that we went through the other day where, we have these high implied run total teams. Examples would be, the Orioles, the Nationals, and the Reds for tonight. So I'm also interested to see how line movement develops throughout the day. We kind of touched on this with the Marlins reverse line movement from yesterday and how that played out. And I expect some similar movements to occur today.
Yeah, so for people who don't know, explain what a reverse lineman movement is.
Yeah, so yesterday, the Marlins game, it's an example of where a high percentage of bets are being placed on one team, but the line is moving in favor of the other team, even though they're still and then the differential is increasing in regards to the other team. So the Marlins were getting closer to their opponent in terms of implied runs, but the percentage of bets wasn't changing. So that implies that sharp money is being put on the Marlins late. So therefore the reverse line movement. And it happens, quite a bit throughout the day in some of these games.
Yeah, and obviously you want to target the sharp money or a big bet, which kind of implies sharp money. Anyone can make a bet and go to Vegas and do that, but we're looking for the guys who obviously do this full time, and we can kind of trust their hedge against Vegas. And when we see reverse live movement, it's a good indication of knowing where the smart guys are on a game.
Sure. Yeah, and real quick, one thing I noticed definitely on this late slate is that we don't really have any heavy favorites outside of the Nationals. So I definitely think it'll be interesting to see kind of some pitching ownership, since that's what a lot of people look at is kind of the money line to target a pitcher, which isn't necessarily always right, of course.
So is that going to potentially change up, how you approach the slate? Just the fact that there's no really true favorite. Maybe it's a slate where you don't target the top teams, or.
I think more than anything, it's just interesting to see. But the way I play, it's not going to do too much. I think it will, for one thing, highlight projected ownership in that it'll kind of be all over the place because you don't really have these clear-cut guys that you can assume other people are going based on money lines.
Pitchers-wise, yeah. I mean, I guess batters-wise too, because you can find probably valuable batters really in any of these games.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Let's get into our next segment, which is going to be pitchers. So what we're going to do is we're going to give two intriguing pitchers, not necessarily the chalk pitchers, not necessarily our favorite plays, but just kind of the two most intriguing pitchers of the slate for each of us. And then we're going to each give a fade candidate for tonight for the 7 p.m. slate. Jay, you want to start it out?
Yeah, sure. I'm dying to talk about my boy Kenta Maeda, aka Macon. My number one intriguing pitcher on this slate for none other than he's making his major league debut, and what a debut it is facing the worst team in baseball in a pitcher's park. So the only reason I'm not really yet sold on Maeda is that he doesn't really throw particularly hard. And I'm not expecting him throughout the whole season to really have a high strikeout rate. But what he does have is exceptional command. And, this is a positive facing a team that struggles to hit. So word is throughout the preseason that his changeup is vastly improved, which helps a lot as he hasn't really had an out pitch. I think looking at other pitchers, a similar profile to Maeda is someone like John Lackey, for example. So I wouldn't expect too high of a ceiling, but I am fairly comfortable with the floor here, which makes him an intriguing cash option at just 7,200 on FanDuel. And the next intriguing pitcher I have is Juan Nicasio, who I had to suffer through Nicasio for years at Coors Field. Mm-hmm. Even though it's not really suffering, because who doesn't want to see like a 14 to 2 score or whatever, with the Rockies obviously scoring 2 most of the times. But the primary reason I like Nicasio is not because of Nicasio himself, even though he always has had a live arm, but it's more due to the Pirates pitching coach, Ray Searage. And if you look back with the Pirates pitching over the last 5 years, it's kind of astonishing to see what Searage has done. You can go down the list: J.A. Happ, Francisco Liriano, A.J. Burnett, Edinson Volquez, Charlie Morton. The list goes on. So I don't like to put much, if any, weight into preseason stats, but Nicasio did throw 15 scoreless innings with 24 strikeouts. So the combination of Searage and Nicasio's raw skills is quite intriguing to me, making him my favorite tournament play, and he does bring an elevated strikeout rate as well.
Yeah, strikeout rate's crazy for sure. It struggles in some other areas, but definitely has its strikeouts. Real quick before I give my two, how are you dealing with the kind of lack of data with a new pitcher like Maeda?
Yeah, so that's kind of what I went into, is his pitch type, his command. I'm not expecting a high strikeout rate. I think these are things you have to look at. He's obviously played for years in Japan. Obviously, the game isn't perfectly translated over to United States, and obviously there are a few factors there, but I think you look at, more importantly, the team he's facing. I think command goes a long way for guys we've never heard of or seen before, in that he's not going to get into walk trouble. An unlikely chance of an implosion with him getting the ball in play, at least against a weak hitting team. So I think there are a lot of factors you can look at, along with the obviously the Vegas plays a big role in new pitchers that we have seen nothing about. So there's a lot of different steps of research you can go into looking at a new pitcher. Yeah,
good stuff. My two intriguing pitchers. First one is Strasburg. I don't think it's crazy to mention Strasburg. He's kind of the clearly elite pitcher of this slate. So if you kind of want strikeouts, he's kind of really the only guy that is going to give them to you with a still consistent sort of floor. He has the highest strikeout, K per 9 rate, and probably the highest strikeout prediction. And he also has the second best whip. So he's kind of a guy that is fairly safe, I guess, consistent to. I know he gets some hate in some areas of Twitter, but considering how tough this slate is, especially on the pitcher side, because of there's no clear favorite. He's kind of the only clear favorite, which it matters. If you're kind of looking for cash, he's a guy that you definitely have to look hard at because of those great peripherals. The next guy that I'm looking at is Sonny Gray. He's not a guy that I really target that often, just because I really, really value high strikeout potential. Sonny Gray is not that type of guy. He's not a guy that's going to whiff a ton of batters, but he does have really good stuff. If you kind of look at his advanced stats, he induced ground balls at a 53% rate, and guys just really never get hard contact on him. So he brings a lot of safety. He is a the highest whip of all the pitchers. So he's a guy who I think is more cash than tournaments, but he could be a nice tournament play too, just because of how the slate breaks down. It's just kind of hard. I will let you go to your fade because I think it's in direct opposition of one of mine.
Yeah, man, this is gonna hurt. And tell you, Twitter haters, Strasburg haters out there, I'm one of them. I hate Strasburg. But yeah, all the things you mentioned are obviously right. He's facing a weak Braves offense. Obviously, his strikeout rate is by far the highest. He's definitely the best pitcher on the slate. That's not the reason I'm fading him. Obviously, he has everything going for him in this matchup, which I love. But this has everything to do with the weather. And I'm fading Strauss because I don't want my starting pitcher to be in a potential rain delay. With the likelihood, especially with Strasburg, of even a 40-minute delay knocking him out of the game. So I think looking at the rain chances possibly occurring midway or later in the game, I think it kind of caps his upside in terms of the likelihood of him reaching that. So I guess I'm fading him in cash, but I'm still obviously open to him in tournaments.
Yep, definitely fair, for sure. Definitely need to monitor that. The guy that I'm fading is Pineda. He has a really weird trend that I found last year. He's plus 10.13 as far as plus minus when he's below 8.8K, and he is minus 7 when he's above. So I don't really know what that means. I think it could just be noise, just randomness, but and I'm not saying make decisions based solely off a player's price because it's not like he's aware of his own price. But the fact of the article that was kind of written in that manner last year was that he's just a very boomer bust guy. And I think people are going to treat him as an elite pitcher in this slate just because of the reasons we talked about before. There's no one else. And I think that he has a ton of bust potential. So I'm going to kind of leverage that and his potential high ownership into a fade. So that's just my thought on him.
Yeah, he's definitely a tough one to nail down on most nights.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's move into our next segment. We're going to talk about batters, and these are going to be two intriguing batters, not necessarily the chalkiest. Could be just two intriguing batters that we have found, and then we'll hit value batters after. Jay, I'll let you start again. Who are two intriguing batters you're looking at in this slate?
Yeah, the first intriguing batter I'm looking at is Brian McCann. I like him quite a bit for tournaments, kind of just looking at the catcher position as a whole, especially relative to tournaments. You want upside out of every position in your lineup. I think McCann carries that upside with his home run potential. Playing at Yankee Stadium, obviously a positive, especially for McCann. He has pretty strong home splits with home runs since he's been a Yankee. So, I think obviously that makes sense because he's a lefty with the park dynamics. So I'm looking to get heavy exposure on both sides with tournaments with McCann. And the second bat, not too surprising, Chris Davis. He ranks number 1 in our models at first base for both DraftKings and FanDuel. We went into him a bit the other day, and I think the same details apply here. A WOBA of 402 last year against righties, facing a righty in Kyle Gibson. Pretty easy cash play written all over it. I think you add the fact that there are no weather concerns this game, which kind of stabilizes him as my top cash play.
Cool. So two intriguing guys. First one for me is Bryce Harper. I know that's really lame to mention Bryce Harper, but the reason I'm kind of thinking about this, and this is going to be kind of a trend of some of my other selections in this pod, is I'm really embracing the risk of that weather game. Obviously, Washington, Atlanta has a potential to be rained out, has that issue. You brought it up when we were talking about Strasburg. It is such a high upside game that I'm kind of embracing it with Strasburg and Harper and some other guys that we'll get into a little bit. And I'm going to, if I can get the upside of Harper, and we saw that. I mean, his first at bat just knocked one out of the park this season. If I can get the upside of Harper at an ownership discount, even if it's slight, is always a good thing in tournaments. Just kind of quickly, I mean, he's obviously the top hitter of the slate. 42 WOBA, 360 ISO, 698 slugging against righties. I mean, it's a Hall of Fame.
Is that good?
It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
incredible
monster, man.
Yeah, he's so good. And the other guy I'm looking at is Mark Teixeira for the Yankees. He owns a 402 WOBA, 343 ISO, and 616 slugging against righties, which is not bad in its own right. Just really good splits against righties. Projected hit cleanup for the Yankees. Colin McHugh doesn't throw super hard. His average velocity is one of the lowest one of the slates at 90.4, but he does allow the most fly balls. And we kind of talked about the fact that Vegas isn't necessarily 100% always right. So I think that the Yankees Houston game could be a potential interesting one to look at for a reason I think that we can get into a little bit later in your stat of the day. So come back for that. Let's get into value batters now, and I'll let you take yours. You're going to go through 2 FanDuel ones, and I'll take 2 DraftKings ones.
Yeah, my first FanDuel value batter of the day is Cesar Hernandez, just 2,200 on FanDuel. So, I think Hernandez will carry pretty high ownership in cash. I think he'll find his way in my cash lineups tonight as well. It's not very often you can find a leadoff hitter. He's projected to hit leadoff at just 2,200. So this automatically puts him on the radar for cash games. I'm not expecting the Phillies offense to do anything significant in this game or really ever this entire season, but Hernandez does have some pretty nice stolen base potential. The problem with Hernandez is that he will likely be chalky and suffers from potential rain as well, so which could cause a postponement in this one. So the pivot I'm looking for, who is also another value play on FanDuel, is Brian Dozier at just 3K. I'll get into the reasons I like the Twins, coming up, but Dozier hitting leadoff in a game that has no threat of rain certainly makes for one of my favorite tournament plays for hitters.
Cool. On DraftKings side, 2 value bats I like. First guy is Zach Cozart. He was one of my value bats for a Monday slate, and he is again. He has negative splits today. I get that. He has negative splits against righties. So I think people might be a little off of him potentially. I really just think he's underpriced. I mean, he's a guy who's hitting in the first spot for one of the highest implied teams in Cincinnati. So anytime you get a guy who's hitting in that high of an order spot with a kind of a high implied team total, you're automatically getting value, especially when a guy is super cheap. It's just 3-1 on DK, and you're just really hard to find value bets, especially if you want to get Harper and Chris Davis and all these guys in potentially. But even despite the fact that he has negative splits, his splits are still pretty good. I mean, he's 325 WOBA and 201 ISO. Just underpriced, I think. The next guy that I have as a value play for DK is Jed Lowry. In their first game against the White Sox, he had a single, 2 RBIs, and a walk. He has great splits against lefties, 384 WOBA, 254 ISO, 524 slugging. And he's facing Rodon, who is I know him from his North Carolina days. He was a lockdown pitcher at State, but definitely has some boomer bust potential for the White Sox. Got blown up a little bit in spring training at times. So again, this is just kind of guys who are underpriced relative to kind of where they are in their batting order. So that's another guy I'm looking at. Let's move to stacks, Jay, and I'll let you kind of give a stack that's intriguing to you, and we'll kind of move from there.
Yeah, I think we kind of highlighted in the Vegas section of this pod the kind of chalky stacks, just the highest implied team totals. But on this slate, the Twins are my favorite stack of the day, playing at Camden Yards facing Giovanni Gallardo. Gallardo is a long way from earlier in his career when he could throw nearly 98 miles per hour. So on this slate in particular, Gallardo had the slowest average fastball last year at just 89.5 miles per hour. I'm looking for the Twins to just hammer Gallardo, with my boy Miguel Sano being the number 1 beneficiary. So I'm looking to have a lot of exposure to Dozier. That actually rhymes too. Exposure Dozier. Come on, it's perfect. And Miguel Sano and Trevor Plouffe as well. So the Twins are my favorite stack of the day on this slate.
Yeah, fair. That's definitely a good call. My stack's not super exciting. It's the Nationals. I know I'm being lame, but again, it goes back to the theme of I want to embrace the risk and the volatility of that game, because I could potentially get a really, really high upside offense and reduced ownership. And really, ownership is something that we always have to be very, very mindful of. It really just dictates GPPs, even more so than player value, more so than how a guy rates or what his WOBA or ISO is. We have to be aware of a guy's his ownership rate in tournaments. And FantasyLabs co-founder Jonathan Bales has brought up this idea of anti-fragility, which was a term that he brought over into DFS. And it really is just talking about, where can you benefit when the public is wrong or about something, or when when you can embrace risk, what's the upside? And I think this is a potential game where, you have all the upside in the world, but you could also potentially get the upside of winning a tournament with them. And I just think it's a really, really, really plus EV move to potentially target the Nationals in what's a great game. You could lose your money because it could be rained out, but you could also take down a tournament. And I kind of like the odds of that.
Yeah, high risk, high reward.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Let's go to the next segment, which is going to be the stat of the day. And I'll let you roll through yours first.
Yeah, okay. So stat of the day, looking over the slate for me, is pinpointing Yankee Stadium. I think there's some value to be had there. And the stat is the wind is blowing at 16 miles per hour out at Yankee Stadium. So looking at our trend section, we can look that it's added a whole point to plus minus for hitters using our historical data. So I think this kind of plays in hand with your call of Teixeira, McCann. There's several guys kind of in this game that you can take advantage of due to the wind. So that's something that I want to highlight in my tournament exposure, just kind of adding more value to this game.
Yeah, so you're primarily a cash game player. Do you focus more on weather because of kind of the cash game plays, or do you think that tournament players can also focus on it a lot as well?
I think it's actually bigger for tournament players to focus on the weather, especially temperatures, humidity, everything for tournaments, because a lot of people don't look at that. I think people for cash look at the obvious things like precipitation, which of course as a cash game player is the number one thing you're concerned about because you need a high floor. So yeah, I think you utilize weather a lot in both formats, just differently.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I know, there's been a lot of writers, going back to Bales, he's done a lot of studies on weather, and in particular, there's a lot more home runs when it's hot. I don't think that's, it's fairly intuitive, but, there's just a lot of data that you can see that shows, you're getting value and you're getting high upside plays just by accounting for either wind or weather or temperature or whatever it may be. So
yeah, I don't know how trustworthy that is because I never hit any home runs and I played in some really hot weather back in the day. So
yeah. Then it's probably wrong.
Yeah,
we should probably just discount the data. But yeah, no, I think it is intriguing because I would say that a lot of potential things in our models, not only our advanced data that we have this year, but also stuff like weather and the stat of the day that I'm about to give, are things that I don't think the public necessarily really ever gauges when they're selecting their players. They're kind of looking at Vegas lines and looking at kind of basic stats like probably they're looking at WOBA, which is an advanced stat compared to where it was a couple of years ago. But I don't think people are really gauging kind of the nuanced things like weather and stuff like that. Do you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially even in the last few years of DFS, generally speaking, I think it's gotten a lot more detailed. You kind of have to look at these things, or else you're going to be a step behind most people. So it's important. The more data, the better that we have at our, we can look at. So.
Yeah, any edge you can find is definitely a good way to go about playing, and you could potentially find an edge in weather. My set of the day is Strasburg for the Nationals. Gets Tony Randazzo behind home plate. He's the home plate umpire for the Nationals Braves tonight, and he has added 1.2 points in terms of plus minus in the last year to pitchers. So he is definitely a pitcher's ump. And that mark is one of the better marks that we've seen in our database. So talking about another edge, I think that's something that you can focus on. I really don't even. I mean, we're the only place that even has umpire data, that is plus minus. So unless you have a subscription to FantasyLabs, you're not getting that data anywhere. And even people who have FantasyLabs aren't necessarily even looking at that column to kind of gauge what sort of value you're getting from an umpire. I think that's a huge edge potentially for people.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's a great piece of information, not only on this slate, but every slate to kind of look at and see if anything stands out as far as home plate umpires.
Yeah, and they affect the game a ton. I mean, they're calling balls strikes. Obviously, strikeouts are key for tournaments and also cash games. So, if we have a guy who is really dependent on strikeouts, like Strasburg, who has the kind of that upside, it makes sense to like kind of look at his home plate umpire and say, okay, is he calling strikes? Because if he's a guy who's just calls a really tight plate and a guy struggles with control or doesn't have a lot of strikeouts, is potentially a bad fit. So always something to monitor for sure. Cool. Let's go to our bold call today. I'll let you go first, and then I'll give mine, and I'll recap my other one from Monday as well.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Recapping for Monday, speaking of, I'm doubling down. I didn't get a chance for my bold call of the day to come through because that game got postponed. So I'm putting those jelly beans down again on A-Rod.
Wow.
Hitting a home run today, under 10% ownership in tournaments. We kind of highlighted already the wind blowing out the Yankees. That game being interesting for stacking purposes, kind of highlighting some of these Yankees players and McCann. I like A-Rod in the spot today as far as projected ownership and upside for sure.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, let's just make that your bold call today until it happens.
The seat. I mean, yeah, I would.
He'll hit a home run at some point today.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to hit one this entire season. But he just the rain ruined the bold call. I have to go back. I can't let that one slide.
I hear you. Yeah. My bold call, I didn't hit it, but I think the nature of it came through. I thought Nolan Arenado was going to
who did score the most?
I think it was Duffy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because Arenado dropped that massive bomb. Yeah.
Yeah. And he had a great game. So, and he was very low owned. He was like 2% owned in tournament. So I think the idea behind my bold call worked out. Unfortunately, that San Francisco game just went off, which kind of hurt. But
for sure.
Yeah, no, I think it was bold, and I like the results. So today's bold call of the day is a Houston Astros stack will take down GPPs.
I like it.
My reason is Vegas can be wrong, Pineda can bust. I know my favorite stack of the day, so I'm kind of going against myself with the Nationals. But I wanted to be able to talk about both of them, so I made the Nationals the stack of the day, and then I made this my stack. I think that Pineda has a lot of bust potential, and he could potentially get rocked. And so Houston, even though they don't have amazing splits against righties, they usually tee off against lefties. They still have the potential with Springer and Correa and all these kind of young guys. Rasmus is going to probably hit cleanup, and he has good splits against righties. So I like them in their spot to potentially kind of buck the Vegas trend and potentially win a GPP.
Yeah, for sure. They definitely have the makeup too as a tournament stack with their high strikeout rate and then high home run rate too. I believe they were second in the league last year in home runs to the Blue Jays. So yeah, I mean it's a perfect stack to call for taking down a tournament.
Yeah, and they're in that same sort of weather situation. Obviously, you mentioned the weather in Yankee Stadium, and we talked about how A-Rod, McCann, and Teixeira were all going to reap the benefits. And if we think that, then we also have to potentially think that that the Astros could as well, and they could potentially bomb some out of the park as well.
Absolutely, for sure.
Cool. That's it. Do you have any other advice for our dedicated listeners / watchers?
Yeah, I always do. Always got advice for you guys. I think with this early season scheduling, it's a bit intimidating, especially for whoever's new with MLB with these split slates. We have games starting all times of the day. I can't even keep track, honestly. It's really hard. So I think my advice is to kind of pick your spots if you're just kind of starting. Don't be overwhelmed. Today I'm taking off the early only slate and kind of the all day slate, and I'm just focusing primarily on the slate, which we just potted about, which kind of why I'm only playing the late slate. But I think we got like another couple weeks or 3 weeks of this wacky schedule, kind of with day games every day and kind of obscure scheduling compared to seasons past. It'll get more into a normal schedule, but I think my biggest advice is just to not everybody has to be CSU Ram and play every single slate. You can take some slates off and key in on a particular slate of any day. Yeah,
that's great advice. And I would say especially do that if you don't necessarily have the time to look at a full game slate or full day slate. It's much better to take off your action off one and maybe just play the 7 p.m. slate if that's going to intensify your research on that slate and give you a bigger edge, as opposed to just kind of be adequate or average in all the slates you're playing. Yeah. So find your edge and exploit it. I like that. Yeah. whatever slate that may be. Obviously, this one is for the 7 p.m., but John writes the full day breakdown every day. So cool. All right, Jay. Appreciate it. Appreciate you being up so early.
Oh yeah, of course.
And researching MLB with me.
Definitely. Anytime. Always down to get up early. I don't even drink coffee. I'm a savage.
Wow.
I just crack open a bag of Chewy Sprees and I'm good to go.
Love it. Sounds great. Well, thanks for listening and watching, everyone. Good luck tonight, and we'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Sounds great.